Okay, so we are now entering our fifth and last panel. The title of this panel, or the topic rather, is Collaborating with Financial Institutions, Bridging the Funding Gap. So the moderator for this panel is Mrs. Rolake Akingube Felani. Round of applause, please, for Rolake. Rolake, can I ask you to get on stage before I... Thank you. I want to embarrass her because, again, like all the rest of our moderators, her profile is pretty amazing. Hi. So Rolake is a leading energy infrastructure and finance professional with over 17 years of experience in Africa. She is passionate about financing Africa's infrastructure deficit, promoting financial inclusion, expanding energy access, and building sustainable cities. With expertise in infrastructure development, investment banking, finance, commodities research, and consulting, she has built strong relationships with stakeholders and has consulted on country risks, new ventures, and business expansion opportunities. Fluent in French, bonjour, oui. Bonjour. Fluent in French, she has traveled to over 30 African countries and has extensive experience in Pan-African energy, financial, and capital markets. She's a top 275 global female influencer, executive in energy, and has received numerous awards and recognitions. Please, another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Mrs. Rolake Akingube Felani.
It's Rolake. People often make that mistake. Thank you very much. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to introduce the panelists first before we get into the discussion. I hope they're all here. I think and I believe they are. First up is Chijioke Uwaegbute. Sorry. Yeah, did I get that right? I did. Okay. Is a partner with PwC Nigeria. He heads the Global Enterprise Tax Solutions team for West and Central Africa. That's Chijioke Uwaegbute. And next up, we have Mobolaji Adeoye, who's a managing partner of Consonant Investment Managers. Is Mobolaji here? Oh, yes. Fantastic. And last but by no means least, we have Promise Ikechukwu George, the group head of the Creative and Digital Industry Group at BOI. You know, I really feel like this panel should have come first. You can't really build this industry without finance. There's a quote, it's actually a passage in the Bible in Ecclesiastes that says, money answereth all things, right? So we're here to talk a bit about that. But the reality is there are obviously a lot of challenges that go into funding any sector, never mind the creative industry, where it's arguable that most of our institutions don't really understand it in the way they should. And I think that's a challenge. So in 2019, the Central Bank of Nigeria launched a creative industries fund that was meant to be capitalized with 22.2 billion naira. 4 years later, does anybody know anybody who was able to access that fund? Or tried to, or applied for that fund? Oh, you did access it. But you applied. Okay, it would be interesting maybe later to hear what that process was like. Oh, you do know somebody. Okay, well, I guess that's a good starting point. But I think that basically highlights part of the problem we're facing. It's a really difficult industry to understand and dissect for a lot of traditional incumbent players. Also think about the fact that most of our economy has been based around the oil and gas sector. So if you go into a bank today and say you want to finance an oil field, they understand the basic mechanics of how it works. So part of what I think we need to start with is looking at how we position this industry as being critical to Nigeria's sustainable economic development. Until we're able to do that, and it's going to be difficult for all the stakeholders to rely on that. But I'll leave the insights to the panelists, and I want to go to Chijioke first of PwC. In your view, are financial institutions well positioned to understand the dynamics of the sector? And if not, how can we better support them to do so?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to practice the name. Rolake. Rolake.
Sorry, I know I murdered yours as well.
Yeah, but no, like,
It's Rolake.
Rolake.
Yeah.
Good.
It's actually Rolake as opposed to Rolake, but I'll let you off the hook.
This is a tough task for an Igbo man. Rolake.
It's okay. You're going in a totally different direction, but I'll take that. Rolls. Yeah, that's my nickname.
I could do it rolls. Yeah, yeah. So really, I think in the first instance that the banking industry, they like the idea of the creative industry. The idea of the creative industry, it sounds nice. It's we want to finance the creative industry and the rest, but you are right. They don't understand the industry. They don't understand the dynamics of the industry. They don't understand what it takes to fund the industry. That's the truth. Nigerian banks haven't gotten to that level. Apart from my good friend Promise. Promise will probably speak about his experience. They've had a lot of experience, a lot of wins and losses as well. But if we look at the broader industry, they don't understand the business. They don't understand the cash flows. They don't understand how long it takes to convert this thing, convert a piece of work, how long it takes to monetize it. Then let's also look at the cost of funds. It's a killer. If you think about 20-something%, you're going to take a loan to finance a film that you don't even know how well it's going to do in the cinema, and someone is telling you 20-something%, and then they don't even understand, like, rather than asking me to go and bring my grandmother's, birth certificate and, all the landed properties I have in my life, something as simple as an output deal could even be that basic collateral that you need to finance, that piece of content. So I think if they could, invest a little more in understanding the industry, don't get too excited, but also understand the reality of it. Now, something like the sci-fi that you talked about, right? Because they don't quite get it and they are looking at it from the traditional mindset, that's why it's difficult for that money to go out. They got money and they gave out a lot of loans. So you want to ask yourself, what's the difference between them and the BOI? So I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I like the fact that you mentioned the BOI, because the BOI is a bit of a pioneer, I would argue. And Promise, you were part of the team that actually pioneered the creative industries, and you've given out a whole load of money. So what are you seeing that these other traditional commercial banks are not seeing? But I would also mention that you have a development ethos. So impact is a big part of your criteria when you look at opportunities. So please tell us a bit more.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much. And I want to also thank the organizers of this event for giving us the opportunity to be here. Just like I mentioned, in the last 10 years, we've done 100 billion, if not more.
Billion.
100 billion.
Million.
More than that. Billion.
Dollars.
Billion.
Okay,
actually.
billion naira.
Billion
Okay.
naira, yeah. Let me not
I think that deserves a round of applause.
That's still a lot
Yes.
in any country.
Yeah.
And for us, that's just a starting point, right? And you've just hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's because we have this developmental orientation, right? So I wouldn't blame the commercial banks, but of course they're actually living up to expectation, but it's a gradual approach. What happened is that we try to attempt the risk first, right? Now, they are dealing with shareholders' fund. We're dealing with federal government fund. But however, what we're also doing is to also source fund from overseas. But because we've experimented the creative industry, we've seen the challenges, right? We felt that, yes, there's more impact, right, in this industry, right? So we're not looking at the profit aspect of it. But we believe that if we're able to impact, since that's our major goal, we'll be able to deepen the developmental effectiveness of the industry. Like when we started 10 years ago, we started with just film funding, and then we'll move, to distribution centers.
I was actually going to ask you, what subsectors of the creative industry are receiving more of that funding?
In fact, the two sectors that we started with, for now we have about 16 subsectors, but under 4 broad areas. Now, talking about what we describe as entertainment infrastructure, which we haven't done much, but we believe that will actually spur growth within the sector. If you look at the Nigerian, system, we don't have things like O2 Arena. What we have is a hotel, right? Now, look at what most of our guys are doing abroad. They generating so much money from the arena shows and stuff like that. But we've tried to attempt one, which is going to take off by the first quarter of next year. And that's going to be behind the pumps. So we believe we're able, yes, if we're able to establish that, I think we've done about 60% of it. I think the construction will be done by first quarter of next year. If that happens, believe you me, it's going to open the industry.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have other sectors, like talking about art and craft.
Okay.
Right? We're also, right now, we've expanded our impact within the creative and what we call the creative and digital technologies, like the animation, for instance, right? We have a number of that. Then we're also talking about creative hubs. Now, the film city that's coming up too, we're also going to have a hand in that. So there are so many, it's multidimensional, but we are taking them one after the other. But in a nutshell, we have about four broad areas that we are covering right now.
I feel like you need to run a capacity building workshop for commercial banks because clearly another round of applause for the Bank of Industry. And I know you're doing a lot in gender, so you really think outside the box. That's great. So I guess my question for you, Mobolaji, you work in a company that does investments, but you also set up, I believe you're part of the team that set up the first fintech platform for creatives. Now, should creatives looking at fundraising just pretty much focus on the equity investor side because those are risk takers, and maybe just leave the debt side, the bank lending? And what are your thoughts? And can you tell us a bit more about this fintech platform?
Yeah. So in 2019, I tried to invest in movies actually. And one of my experience is that there was just a certain level of opacity, from pre-production, even all the way to distribution, and some of the complaints that the producers had was actually mind-boggling. Actually, there were, I just felt like the value chain wasn't, value wasn't being distributed equitably across the value chain, right? I think there's a segment there called aggregators that actually take 20%, right? And I was thinking about this project. The aggregator wasn't really doing. By the way, aggregators do it. Please don't get upset. Don't get upset with me. I'm just coming at it from a, from a naive perspective, right? So. Right. So for me, and our thesis, at Consonance is fixing value chains, right? Then we also have another sort of work we do, which is we try to sort of make, create asset classes, right? So it just dawned on me, right, that what will it take, to create an asset class for intellectual property in Nigeria? And what is driving that for us is that, we need to do this work if we want to create an industry that allows funding for a good number of people. So it's very, very important to do. The way a lot of creative industry is structured is that the very tippy top 0.001%, right, will probably take most of the value sometimes, because of the way the industry is structured. It's also, I think, the way the industry is structured in anywhere. So the innovative thing that we're trying to do is to say, okay, can we create like a risk mechanism, a system, right, that tries to mitigate that risk along the value chain in our own way and distribute value equitably. So for example, writers shouldn't be getting, I don't know what some writers get paid, but like peanuts, right? They are at the foundation, right? So you should be able to sort of say, okay, every writer for a project will get certain points, right? It encourages everybody. It leads to a healthy value chain. Everybody can scale, right? So that's sort of like at the core of what we're trying to do. It's not easy to do, and it's also something that even the industry themselves, the big boys and girls in the industry, have to decide what kind of industry they want, right? Do they want an industry that's a bit more equitable? If they do, they need some kind of system like that. You can even call it a bank for creatives, right? But it's not like a bank, right? Because you actually have to do some risk mitigation work, right? Or do you want, a system where there are like very few winners and a lot of,
Yeah.
yeah.
We don't want a system like that. We want equity. But if you can start getting your questions ready. So I host a show on Arise News on Saturdays called Business Week. And this last Saturday, we did the business of film, and I interviewed Chinaza Onuzo and Editi Effiong on the Black Book. Interestingly, Editi was telling me when I asked about fundraising and investment returns in the creators that the way he had to raise funds is, let's say they finish filming in Lagos, they run out of money, they'll have to go back to the investor again and say, okay, we need money for this. Okay, they finish that part, they then have to go back to the investor. And to myself, I'm thinking that's not a sustainable way to run a business. But part of the feedback from the investment community is structure. So if you're investing your money in a fintech fund, there's a contract, you know where the receipts are coming from, you have a time value, you can benchmark the returns, but it seems like the industry is somewhat fragmented. So how can we create better structure in the industry to give creators a chance? I'll start with you, Chijioke.
I mean, I probably need a full day for this, because that's what we've been preaching for a long time, structure. First of all, you don't expect, investors would never invest into an industry they don't understand, they don't have the data on, and the problem is also with the creatives. The creatives want to fly under the radar. They don't want to, be identified. So I want to be able to make this my money. I don't want to pay any tax. I don't want to do, I'm sorry, but this is the reality of it. You need to be able to say, first of all, if I'm coming to invest here, what's the size of the industry? Do we know the size of the film industry today? Do we know the size of the music industry or any of the others? One of the things I've been telling government, because we're doing a lot of engagement with government, is first of all, let's try and invest money in data. And let's even understand what is the size of the industry, what kind of returns do you expect in the industry, how can I come and invest in this industry? I've invested in film. I mean, some of the people I've worked with are even in this room. And, we put that money in. We did one of the best films of that year, many nominations and everything. But we didn't make a lot of money because, first of all, the, ability to consume that content in the country is not here. We brought out that film and there were 18 films in the cinema. And what's the consumption time frame? Maybe 6 to 10. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day and maybe weekends. You're competing with 18 films for how many screens? So again, it's to start asking ourselves, if you really want to do that, do you also solve the issues in the value chain in terms of consumption? Netflix and Amazon.
So if I may press you a bit on that, and I'd like anybody else to come in here. Okay, you already touched on one of the things I was going to, whether the advent of streaming platforms will help make some of these investment opportunities more viable. And then secondly, you have an ecosystem member now who is now a minister, right? In a sense, Bosut Tijani, and then you also have the Minister of Culture, Hannatu Musawa, Creative Economy. Well, I don't know if she's really an ecosystem person, but I think she's more of an outsider. But Bosut Tijani came within the tech sector, which is sort of part of the creative industry. What would also be your asks? And I'd like to hear that from everybody, but help me answer the question of whether the streaming platform revolution is really helping transforming the narrative around funding.
Okay. Netflix, Amazon, all the streamers, first of all, they have the people they work with, right, in the first instance. So the big projects are going to a specific number of people. It hasn't become democratized in the first instance. Then you have the people that are the aggregators who then bring together the films for licensing. I don't know that we're getting the best value, but we're getting value. And I think we must take the positives from there. First of all, the value of what we're able to put out there. Editi and Black Book, number one, globally, Netflix. Then they can start taking a bit of notice of Nigeria. So that's the positive, but it's not going to solve the problem. Because in my village in Okigwe, if you do a movie, that movie is going to be pirated because they don't have data to watch Netflix or anything, and they have no other way of consuming my movies, right? But if we can't just do that structure where we're able to say, how do we have 200 million Nigerians. how do we put enough screens? We have probably 200 or so, can't remember how many, it keeps changing, maybe 300 screens for 200 million people. Makes no sense.
Okay.
So then the second part,
Quickly,
which is
please.
Bosun, and I think Hanatu, I've met with her, and she has a specific focus and she wants to do things. It will be, I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble, but it's like day and night if you consider what we had in the past 8 years and her now. That's all I have to say.
Okay, fantastic. So I'd like to hear about what your asks would be for the
Yeah.
policy makers.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that, I mean, if you're, the ask will be to, think about creating this sort of, what I call sort of like a system integration and orchestration element, right?
That sounds heavy. Can you just break it down for us and
So
give us one practical example?
let me break it down, right? So if you look at the value chain, right? Almost any value chain, for example, any value chain, for example, liquidity, money tends to come into those value chains via the distributors, right, or financiers. There has to be responsible and well-funded distributors or financiers that takes the responsibility to try to scale the ecosystem. Because you see, if you try to sort of build something large from day one, right, oftentimes you build crap. These things are built step by step, right? And oftentimes, it follows the flow of commerce, right? So, for example, who is the largest distributor in Nigeria, right? They have to decide, do they want to be a closed platform or do they want to be an open platform, right? An open platform means that they're not necessarily going to be distributing their own movies, right? Because that creates monopoly. It means that they'll open their platform to sort of allow anybody that is not their own IP, right, to be able to come in. When that commerce comes in, right, you begin to sort of see the flow from writing, right, all the way to distribution, right, and that guides you in how to build out your infrastructure.
Interesting. We talked a lot about film. The industry is much more than film.
Yeah. Yes, it applies to almost any industry.
Understood. The principle is well received. So, Promise, you've been dating successfully for a while. So, whilst you're telling us what your asks are, even though technically BOI is a government institution, so you should be asking yourself somewhat. But can you also maybe give advice to the creatives? So if you're approaching a bank and institution for funding, what are your top 3-4 checklists? Broadly, I know people are in different industries and subsectors, but what would you say?
Okay, all right. So first of all, I want to say, BOI is a federal government institution, but we work with a lot of private sector efficiencies, right? And that's why we've always acted differently, from any other institution. And we've survived over time. We're about 60 years old now, okay? Let me just give that experience. When we were going to actually attempt the creative industry, we saw that was completely unstructured. So people come in to ask for 2 billion. But where's your business plan? They're asking, it's in my head. I'm a creative. Right? So we knew quite well that sometimes they'll accuse you, why are you trying to treat me like a manufacturer? So no, you need to have a business plan. That's the structure he was talking about. So what we did was to say, okay, let's do a little bit of the risking. We started with capacity building program. He was also one of those who also trained them on business plan writing, right? So they started understanding what budget was all about. So if you're coming to me, it applies across industries. If you're coming to me with an investment plan, then you need to break it down. I want to see the budget. I want to even see the structure. I want to even see how is my money going to come in. So when people say that financial institutions, commercial banks are quite difficult, not because they're difficult. They want to see how the money will come back. It's not a free flow. It's not a grant, right? So that was what they were lacking. But the good thing today is that some of them understand structure. I was talking to somebody who actually wanted a fund for film. All right, I said, do you have your budget? He said, yes. And in less than 2 minutes, he sent me the budget, giving me a breakdown of how much he's going to spend, pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, right? I was just focusing on distribution because I want my money to come back so that I can continue the ecosystem. That's how you can build the ecosystem. So it applies. Even right now that BOI is even focusing more on even digital, because we want to make everything broad-based. It used to be Creative Industry Group, but today it's Creative and Digital Industry Group. And we're able to pull across one of the guys who are actually doing well in the industry, that's within the fintech, the numbers, that's the CUDA, right? We've been able to fund them this one. Because you see, if you can attract foreign funding, venture capital, it means that you have structure. So that is what investors, even those who are going to invest in your business, that is what they want to look out for. Because nobody wants to dash you money. Somebody was complaining to me to say that some investors brought in fund into his film production, but every time he has to expend anything, he has to go to them to sign off. I said, don't complain. You're right. The guy wants to be sure of his fund. You know, so it applies across the industries, even in manufacturing, in creative, digital, whatever be the case. You know. So,
Great stuff. So, final comment for you before we go to the Q&A. You said you wanted to
I just
say
said
something.
from a government standpoint, and I think, you know, myself and Bolaji in the last administration, we tried to push across incentives for the industry. Government needs to stop making noise about this creative industry. Creative economy is the new oil. That's all talk. If you can't put the incentives and the frameworks to help this industry thrive, and they're very simple things, you know, things as basic as tax credits. You can't even. Right now I'm working with a fund, you know, one of the DFIs. I'm helping them with their loan financing, and now they even want us to do a bit more of the equity work for them. And one of the things that, you know, I always get from other countries is, I'm getting financing, my tax credit is financing $1 million out of this $5 million. But the Nigerian people, absolutely nothing. So the government needs to stop paying lip service to this and put together the right incentive framework to make this industry work.
Absolutely, and I think it's probably also a knowledge gap issue there, even with the government. Okay, so can we open it up for questions, please? Okay, we'll go with Tefa. How many questions do we?
Just three. Please.
Okay, all right.
Three quick, concise questions. The first question is Terfa in front.
Thanks, guys. That's, you know, a very richly rewarding session. But the risk of replicating some of the questions you've asked, let me just very quickly give an example of some of the work Tempo company has done with trying to bring data into the industry. We're working with a company, it's a UK company called Sound Diplomacy, and their work is basically in stakeholder mapping. So what we've started working with them is, you know, try to even document how many studios do we have in Lagos, how many music facilities, you know, basic things like that an investor would be interested in knowing before putting their money there. So my question is really, you know, from you guys' perspective, how can we scale things like that up? You know, this is, as far as I know, just we're doing it alone, we're not partnering with anyone, but how do we scale that up so that, if you look at fintech met the entertainment industry on the job. You know, entertainment industry has existed forever, but they've taken it over, you know, because they're templates for how due diligence is carried out, you know, how people can actually bring their money and, you know, and sleep at night. You know, how can we do that for the entertainment industry? What are the templates that we can use to scale up? Thank you.
Great question. Maybe Mobolaji, would you like to have a go at that question?
You know, as you've said, right, I mean, the template is there. You know, one of the key challenge really, right, is finding sometimes the funding, you know, to support institutions, right? I mean, again, you know, what you guys are doing, you know, is what you know, the big word that I used the other time, you know, network orchestration or systems integration. What that means really is that, you know, when you have a fragmented value chain, right, there has to be a body or bodies, you know, that are sort of looking to integrate them so that everyone is talking with each other, right? You know, so that you can understand, you know, where the gaps are, where you need to invest, you know, and things like that. So what you guys are doing is, it's that, you know, so you just have to continue doing it, you know, but the question is, you know, do you have like a model, right, to sort of use to scale that? You know, that's the question, right? So yeah, so we need investors actually. You know, you know, I think Sony announced, you know, $10 million.
It's peanuts.
$100 million.
But it's peanuts.
$100 million, yes. Okay.
It was $10 million. It wasn't that.
Yeah. Scale, that's a massive difference. Scale of 10. Because I was like 10 million, you know, query, but it's okay. but you know, we need more of that, right? Almost all the creative tech companies, you know, I mean, I hear from some of them, they always complain nobody wants to give them money, right? So my view is, you know, folks like you know, that are actually trying to sort of build that data, you just have to go and raise the money.
Yeah, can I make two suggestions? One potentially is collaboration with other sectors. So I work in the energy sector, clean tech sector, and one of the things we found that the hybrid projects where we collaborate with a fintech company is more likely to attract investment because there's an additional diversified revenue source. So one of the things the creative sector can do, especially with this whole interface with the digital economy, is perhaps to look for more of those collaborative projects with people who have more access. The second point I wanted to make is, and this is something maybe the industry can also borrow, recently the Nigeria Energy Transition sector released something called the Nigeria Energy Transition Map. So what they do, they created an online technology tool where they mapped all the areas of the country that were off-grid so that investors could then use that tool to make investment decisions. Now, the intellectual property around the IP for the patent for the technology was a private company that then brought this to the public sector to say, this is the idea we have, how can we scale it and make this accessible, make it become a strategic national project. So, I mean, those are some of the things that could perhaps work.
And frankly, if people are worried about ownership, you know, there's public trust infrastructure, right? That is, you know, so, you know, that is something that is very well known, right? Just, you know, because sometimes, you know, collaboration becomes tough sometimes, you know, because everybody's kind of wondering. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I refuse to allow the government to go scot-free in this. And why I say this is, in the film industry, you have ComScore. Now you have a bit of an idea around what movies make. So you now start understanding, okay, this is what it is. You are doing yours with the studios. In PwC, we are having to invest our own money in the Africa Media and Entertainment Report, which tries to get this data. But the question is, why can't, and then even I'm working with another DFI who is looking to fund studies around getting data on the industry. But why is everybody else doing this thing when we can just get the minister who is in charge of the creative industry to take ownership and just fund a study? Because you're going to have to do primary data collection. You know, I got information that there are 1,700 screens in northern Nigeria. I don't know how true that is, but I got that from an industry group in northern Nigeria. That's 1,700 screens. That's more than 3 times or 4 times the capacity of screens in the entire Nigeria. So government needs to take ownership, fund that study, and then you can then make a lot of noise about this, your new oil.
Really great ideas. I hope we're recording some of these
We're recording
rapporteurs.
everything. Thank you, Chijioke. We have one last question coming from Toyosi. I'll get one of you.
I don't want to be the last person. We can hand you over to somebody else.
Okay, so we'll get from the gentleman in the white T-shirt. In the white T-shirt. Is what
All
it's
right.
like.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Toby. I run a startup called Metro. So what we basically do is offer payroll and benefits for creatives. So over the last couple of months, we've built out a very large, extensive credits score using things like social media and reach streams to give credit to creators. But our major issues is to accessing credits, because how we basically give this money out is we finance invoices, so it's really much secured. So I think my question is really addressed to my vice from BOI. How do we access this credit infrastructure from the BOI?
Okay, that's fine. Maybe we're also going to speak after here, right? So I can get details about what you've just done.
Yeah,
because it's also going to play a major role in the IDICE, program. Of course, investment in digital, digital in technology and creative industries, which a part of the fund, right, is also going to be dedicated to grants. By so doing, yours also comes on that. Because when you were talking about they should do more, the question is that where is the fund going to come from, right? So part of it is also going into those capacity building area, advancing, knowledge-driven infrastructure like what you just mentioned. Because if you have that, you can actually use that to profile creative prospects, okay, who are also coming for the loan. Because we have tried IP, and that was in 2016, using the Knowledge Fund program, right, where we said, okay, forget about your collateral, you can actually access up to 50 million with your IP, all right? It worked a bit. But what actually affected us, because I don't want to put the blame on the creatives, because there are people who also came with, character issues too, right? They have been affected right now because their names are in the credit bureau, so they can't run away with banks' fund, no matter what it is, all right? So but some of them, what actually happened, the genuine ones, was that the program was focused on cinematic films, all right? And then we have a few cinemas, like it's about cinema. We need more cinemas. Yes, we have digital distribution platform, but they have to run currently, right? So after cinema, you go to Netflix. After the Netflix, you come back to cinema. So that is what it is, because income streams also matters. So when you talk about business plan, you want to open up the income streams. So if I have an IDAS, for instance, and somebody's coming to me that I know is popular, I could actually rely on this credit score, from the infrastructure to profile the person. Now back to Knowledge Fund. What happened was that even those who could not afford to pay up their fund because they were limited by cinemas, the cinema income, right? By the time the distribution platform came, like the Netflix, they went back to Netflix, got money and paid off. People like the Oprah Williams paid off. Most of them actually paid off because there were alternatives, and that's why we need more of these digital platforms. They are also key, because if I'm giving you my money, that's what investor looks out for. Yes, you've got a fantastic concept, but how is my money going to come? Then I look at the income streams. I say, okay, when I invest, my money will come back to me. Look at the phenomenon. When we saw that cinema was not going to be an e-way at all, we said, just hold on, right, until we get a big deal. And when we got a better deal from Netflix, he paid about investors. And that was about $350,000 deal, right? Somebody walked into my office, was here day before yesterday, and she said, I don't have collateral. But I said, okay, let me know your profile. And she said she's been producing for Netflix, Amazon, and I said, okay, what was the highest you've actually grossed in from this digital platform? He said $800,000. I said, the one you have right now, how much is it? He said $1.2 million. I said, give me the paper and forget about tangible collateral. Because $1.2 million is coming. And what she wants is 500 million naira, right? That's 2 times coverage. So why do I need collateral? You understand? So if you send that to a bank, the bank won't also do the same. Because right now, banks are getting disposed to even offering bank guarantee, to some, customers. Like Jade Siberu got a BG from one of the banks. That's because of her profile. Because when she walked into a bank, we were the first to fund her, right? And now she's done about 4 times. And she's paid, and she has been paying on record time. So that profile loan opens door for investors. But right now, please, I don't. Much money. So character too is also important in this whole game.
Fantastic. That's it?
That's it.
Okay, so you heard the panel. I said at the beginning that money answered all things, right? So we want the investors to answer these guys and the creators. But also, there's another part in Proverbs that says, wisdom is the principal thing. And in all the getting of wisdom, also get understanding. So I think we need to close the knowledge gap. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the wisdom that you've imparted. Can I also ask that you just leave yourself open and available for one-to-one questions from members of the crowd? I know there were quite a number of questions that were trying to be asked, but for the interest of time, I had to, sort of ignore some. So please, if you can just hang behind 10, 15 minutes and just give them your time and your expertise. All right? Thank you. Thank you so much. If I can just ask you to hold on for a second while your pictures are taken, and then you can